Now, as promised, the news in detail. Let's begin with Pakistan's Prime Minister Imran Khan, who says extremist forces have hijacked India. Speaking at the Torkham border crossing with Afghanistan, Khan ruled out talks with India until it restores occupied Kashmir's special status. Prime Minister Khan said he will fight Kashmir's case at the United Nations General Assembly. Khan also informed his Swedish counterpart, Stefan Löfven, about India's illegal actions in occupied Kashmir. The Prime Minister also said peace in Afghanistan will benefit Pakistan the most. He went on to say that Islamabad will try its best to revive the Afghan peace process. Pakistan says the world has rejected India's narrative of painting occupied Kashmir's indigenous movement, freedom movement, as terrorism. Foreign Minister Shah Qureshi said Pakistan's relentless efforts have got the world discussing the Kashmir conflict. Addressing the Kashmir conference in Islamabad, he said Pakistan will always stand with Kashmiris. He said global bodies, including the EU and the UN, have supported Pakistan's stance on the current Kashmir crisis. He says even India's own Supreme Court has exposed Prime Minister Narendra Modi's government's illegal annexation. Addressing the conference, Azad Kashmir Prime Minister Raja Farooq Haider said Pakistan is a stumbling block for India. President Arif Alvi and Senate Chairman Sadiq Sandrani will also address the conference. The European Parliament, meanwhile, has called the situation in Indian-occupied Kashmir alarming and unacceptable. Meeting in Strasbourg, the Parliament strongly criticized India for denying Kashmiris their right to self-determination under UN resolutions. The EU Parliament was discussing the deepening crisis in occupied Kashmir after India's illegal annexation of the disputed territory. European lawmakers asked India to end its lockdown of occupied Kashmir and to lift its communications blackout. It said New Delhi must be held accountable for the murder of Kashmiris by the Indian Army. The European Commission Vice President Federica Mogherini said the situation in the valley is unacceptable. MEP Klaus Buchner said the UN must intervene and send a peace mission to evaluate the situation. EU Minister Taiti Tebiranian said the Union will continue to closely monitor the situation in Indian-occupied Kashmir. Well, the Indian government says it will keep detained politicians from occupied Kashmir behind bars for up to 18 months. The Minister of State for the Prime Minister's office, Jitendra Singh, is the first senior functionary to put a timeline on their detentions. Leaders of the Kashmir freedom struggle and other local politicians were arrested after the annexation of Kashmir's special status on August the 5th. Meanwhile, a senior Turkish MP, Hakan Çavuşoğlu, has called on India to immediately halt its human rights violations in occupied Kashmir. The head of the Turkish Parliament's Human Rights Commission says Kashmir has become one of the most sensitive regions in the world. The Taliban say its doors are still open for peace talks if U.S. President Donald Trump wants to resume dialogue. In an interview, Taliban chief negotiator Sher Mohammad Abbas Stanikzai said negotiations are the only path to peace in Afghanistan. Stanikzai said the Taliban did nothing wrong by launching attacks on U.S. troops in the absence of any ceasefire. He said the U.S. should not have reacted to the death of one American soldier by killing thousands of Taliban fighters, as Washington has claimed. The chief negotiator said the Taliban hope the U.S. will rethink its decision and resume negotiations. The Taliban have claimed responsibility for 2 suicide bombings that killed 48 people in Afghanistan yesterday. Well, in Afghanistan itself, a woman and a child were among several people injured in an attack on a government building in Jalalabad. Officials say the attackers detonated explosives before storming the building. A government official from Nangarhar province says security personnel cordoned off the area after the attack. He said more casualties are feared. On to news coming out of Israel now, where Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's right-wing coalition has failed to secure a majority after Tuesday's elections. The exit polls point to Netanyahu trailing his rival Benny Gantz. Exit polls suggest Netanyahu and his right-wing bloc have failed to reach the required 61 seats for a majority. The polls put Netanyahu's Likud party at 31 seats, trailing Gantz's Blue and White party by 2. Israel's election commission says the final turnout was nearly 70%. The former military chief Gantz had ruled out taking part in an administration with Netanyahu. Gantz was quick to claim victory, although many believed the results were too close to call. Saudi Arabia says the attacks on its oil facilities are a real test of the global will to confront threats to stability. Speaking to South Korea's President Moon Jae-in by phone, Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman stressed the need for a global response. He asked Seoul's help in beefing up the kingdom's air defenses. The two leaders agreed to continue consultations. President Moon also emphasized the importance of a unified international response. He said the attack represents a threat to world security. Britain and Germany have agreed to collectively respond to last weekend's airstrikes on oil installations in Saudi Arabia. In a phone call, Prime Minister Boris Johnson and Chancellor Angela Merkel stressed the need to work with international partners to resolve the crisis. Prime Minister Johnson also called Saudi Arabia's Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman. He reiterated the UK's support for Saudi Arabia and offered to help with its security. International oil prices have declined over 6% since Saudi Arabia said it would restore its full capacity by the end of the month. More in this report.
Much of Saudi Arabia's oil supply capacity has been offline since two major oil installations were damaged in airstrikes on Saturday. Saudi Energy Minister Prince Abdulaziz bin Salman says the kingdom has plugged the shortfall in supplies by tapping inventories.
Over the last 2 days, the damage has been contained, and more than half of the production capabilities that were damaged as a result of the attack have been recovered. The company will meet its commitments to its customers for this month by withdrawing from its reserves of crude oil and making some changes to some oils with the view that complete production capabilities are restored to 11 million barrels per day by the end of September.
The Saudi Energy Minister says the kingdom will continue to play its role as a secure supplier to the global oil markets.
Iran's Foreign Minister Javad Zarif has said the U.S. and its allies have been committing war crimes in Yemen for almost half a decade. Zarif said Washington is embarrassed its hundreds of billions worth of arms could not intercept Yemeni fire. In a series of tweets, he said that the U.S.'s double standards have been exposed as it didn't care while bombing famished civilians in Yemen. He said Washington is in denial if it thinks that Yemeni victims of the worst war crimes wouldn't strike back. The foreign minister said blaming Iran will not change anything because ending the war is the only solution. Yemen's Houthi rebels targeted 2 Saudi oil refineries on Saturday, cutting the kingdom's oil production to half. Washington blamed Iran for the strikes, which Tehran has rejected strongly. Venezuela's government and 5 opposition party leaders have agreed to start a new dialogue process. The main opposition leader, Juan Guaido, was not part of the New Deal. President Nicolas Maduro said the agreement has opened all doors to dialogue and political stability. Hours later, the government released Guaido's number 2, Edgar Zambrano, in what appeared to be a goodwill gesture. Meanwhile, the U.S. and its allies have invoked the Inter-American Treaty of Reciprocal Assistance. U.S. Department of State spokesperson Morgan Ortega says the action was taken to confront the threat posed by Maduro. 2 anti-establishment candidates have taken the highest vote share in the first round of Tunisia's presidential elections. The Electoral Commission says law professor Kais Said leads the first round of voting, while jailed media mogul Nabil Karoui is second. Both have advanced to the runoff round, which will be held in November. 26 candidates, including the current prime minister and a former president, are running for the top office. The Election Commission says voter turnout remains 45%, down from 64% in 2014. Tunisia is the only democracy to emerge from the 2011 Arab Spring. I'll be back after this break with plenty more news. Stay tuned. Spain will head to the polls for the fourth time in as many years on November 10th. Acting Prime Minister Pedro Sanchez announced fresh elections after failing to form a coalition government. In polls held in April, Sanchez's Socialist Party won the most seats but fell short of a parliamentary majority. He called fresh elections after King Felipe failed to build a consensus between rival party leaders. At a press conference, Sanchez blamed the opposition for the political deadlock. But the right-wing People's Party and Ciudadanos Party say Sanchez is responsible. Conservative politicians in South Korea, meanwhile, have shaved their heads in protest against newly appointed Justice Minister Cho Kuk. The minister, along with his family, is surrounded by academic and financial corruption allegations. Conservative Liberal Korea Party leader Hwang Ko-yan got his hair shaved off outside the presidential palace. Protesters want the new minister Cho to resign. Last week, 2 female MPs shaved their heads over the same controversy. The act is a traditional protest in the country. On to news coming out of Italy now, where 3 people have been killed in a powerboat crash. The super speeding boat lost control and slammed into an artificial reef in Venice. The accident happened as the vessel was attempting to break the Monte Carlo to Venice speed record. Firefighters say they pulled 3 bodies from the sunken boat. 1 Italian and 2 British racers are among the dead, while an Italian racer survived. Argentina's 2-year-long economic crisis has intensified in the recent months. The country's inflation topped 55%, while 10% of the population fell below the poverty line. More in this report.
The southern oil-producing province of Chubut is a microcosm of the country's crippled economy. Chubut, with a population of nearly 600,000, produces 30% of Argentina's oil and 50% of its natural gas. But the Patagonian province is suffering the explosive cocktail of galloping inflation, a plummeting peso, and colossal debt. Public servants in the country's oil hub are no longer paid on time. The turmoil has forced even teachers and doctors to go on strike.
And now we don't know when we will get paid. We were going to get paid today, but we didn't. And apart from that, we were going to receive our salary in installments. In other words, without a raise, gradually and in installments.
Healthcare is among the frontline public services to suffer the most. Hundreds of hospitals across the province lack basic facilities.
Hospitals are without income, without supplies, without infrastructure. The same thing happens in schools. I mean, this is a much deeper problem than it seems. It is a crisis in which the workers are the victims. We are the tangible results, but there is a deep crisis in Chubut because public policies are not going to be able to be executed properly.
The country's center-right president, Mauricio Macri, imposed austerity measures to reduce the burden of subsidies on the budget. But Argentina's people say more substantial action is needed to stabilize the worsening economy.
Well, Switzerland was among the first countries to begin deploying the new 5G telecommunication system. Now, worries around the harmful effects of radiation from antennas have sparked a nationwide revolt. Demonstrators against the technology will be filling the streets of the capital Bern later this month.
A growing number of Swiss people are voicing alarm at the possible health risks from exposure to electromagnetic radiation from the new 5G antennae. They have threatened to put the issue to a referendum in a country famous for its system of direct democracy. This allowed the country to pull in revenues of nearly 380 million Swiss francs.
The cantons have risen, 4 or 5 cantons have voted on a moratoria they removed a few days later by the Confederation, which has sold the licenses and has said it is not your area of expertise. You cannot decide, and it's ultimately the whole Swiss political system that is challenged.
Several cantons, including Geneva, have buckled to pressure from online petitioners demanding a halt to the construction of the 5G infrastructure. Opponents are urging authorities to put a moratorium on the rollout. The Swiss Federation of Doctors is also urging caution, especially if there is no proof of any risk to health caused by the increased radiation.
Somehow we are for technology, but technology that works in harmony with life. We cannot stop the progress of technology, we cannot stop the evolution, but it is sure now that 5G is a big no. It does not work that way. When we dig a little deeper, it does not work.
A group of experts was appointed by the Swiss government last year to probe the risks involved with introducing 5G. Their findings will be published later this year.
Let's start off business news with South Korea, which has dropped Japan from its list of countries with preferential trade status. Japan has already downgraded South Korea's status as part of an escalating diplomatic and trade row between the two neighbors. South Korea's Ministry of Trade and Energy says the regulations will apply to weapons exports. Relations between the two countries have declined after a ruling by South Korea's Supreme Court last year. The ruling says Japanese companies should compensate South Koreans used as forced labor during World War II. On to Europe now, where stock markets have moved marginally higher as investors await a U.S. Federal Reserve decision on interest rates later today. Markets are also watching developments in the Gulf after last weekend's airstrikes on Saudi oil installations. The FTSE 100 index is leading gains in Europe after Asian bourses closed mixed. Tokyo's Nikkei 225 index was fractionally lower, snapping a 10-day streak of gains. Hong Kong's Hang Seng index was in negative territory, for the third consecutive day. The Shanghai Composite regained 0.25% after yesterday's losses. A huge waterspout appeared in southwest China's Guangxi Zhuang Autonomous Region. It lasted around 10 minutes at Silver Beach in the city of Beihai. The waterspout wandered the beach, throwing up dust, stones, and debris. It later became a colossal water column connecting the sea and the sky. The rare phenomenon is caused when a tornado passes over a lake or the sea and picks up a column of water and mist. It is also called a water dragon. Time now to find out what the weather is like around the world. And with that, you're all caught up. Thank you for watching this news bulletin here at Indus News.